Yeah.
Surprise, a little different than you're used to.
Yeah.
Dropping these bars on YouTube, knowledge I introduce you.
Yeah.
We chasing this money like it's the prize, it's the voodoo. Fugazi, fugazi, it's just a lie we buying into. We need some cars on deck. Get the rollies, get the Moe, all the Mars on deck. Yep. All right. Good evening, everyone. How are we doing? Not gonna lie, this is completely and utterly impromptu. I wasn't going to do this, but I didn't do a live session on Friday, so this is just a little bit of an extra kind of session to make up for the fact that I didn't do one on Friday. Although we should have done this anyway. But I've had a lot on my plate over the past week or so, and I go away next week, Thursday and Friday, so content is going to be a little bit sparse. But a couple of things I just want to say thank you to everyone, by the way. I mean, I'm looking at the subscriber count now, just over 42,200. So thank you to everyone who's kind of joined the channel, who's subscribed over the past week or so. Channel growth is obviously important, just in terms of making sure that I'm able to kind of reach more people and so. But thank you so much if you have joined recently and you're on this live right now. As usual, this is our customary financial clinic. And what I do with this session is basically take questions, field questions from people, and try to deliver as much value as I possibly can in providing some kind of answer for you to take away and maybe act upon, or at least use as a means to do further research. So I'm going to put about this evening 45 minutes on the clock, because I still have to do some editing in lieu of next week tonight. So I'm on a bit of a schedule, but please do pop in your comments, your questions, anything that you wish to ask, anything that you might be struggling with right now. Pop them in the comment section, and I will do my best to get through to every single comment that we actually have. All right, so let's just have a look very quickly. One sec, I need to pop this up just so that everyone who joins kind of knows what we're doing. Okay, so finance clinic Q&A session. So Naeem, I think Naeem's put something in here. Hi Pete, how you doing? Anything us users should be aware of or on the lookout for in the financial news? Thanks for reading. Look, there's always a lot of stuff going on in the financial news right now. I mean, you can't pay attention to all of it. And it really depends on your circumstances. I mean, Evergrande filing bankruptcy has been a huge topic of conversation over the past few days or so. Should you pay attention to that? Yeah, maybe not. I mean, it really depends on whether you think it's going to impact you or not. And, you know, I have been asked about that over the past day or so on Instagram. And I think Evergrande, look, what was their turn? They were $81 billion, you know, is what essentially they've gone into bankruptcy for, which is the turnover. I believe it's the turnover of like someone like Tesla or something like that. So it's a huge amount of money, but people will be worried because obviously they're one of China's biggest property developers. Now, what does that mean for investors here in the UK and, you know, the rest of the world? Is there that contagion is the question from 2007 and 2008, which means that the impact of that failure could impact global funds. We're yet to see, but I don't think that there will be any significant contagion that will mean that we're in for a financial crash because of that company now declaring bankruptcy. But again, we could be wrong. So I think there are always things that you can pay attention to in the news. I mean, look, if you're looking at the property market right now, you probably want to be paying attention to property market news, interest rate news, inflation, right? If you're looking to prioritize trying to get a little bit more work out of the cash that you currently hold, then you're probably going to be paying more attention to things like savings interest rates, right? So there's always something, but it really depends on your circumstances as to what you should or should not be paying attention to. There's a lot of noise out there. I mean, I did this live on Thursday about the Michael Burry bet, the 1.6 billion pound bet that he's got on at the moment for the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq. I mean, people are talking about this. People are talking about it on YouTube as though it's like the end of the world. Like you should be cashing in your investments, that the world's going to end and everyone's like, get out now. It's like, why? There's a lot of fluff and a lot of
noise out there. I think the difficult thing is how do you be discerning enough to know what is just noise and irrelevant to you. But there's always stuff, mate. I mean, what I'm tracking right now is just for the benefit of the channel is interest rates, property, inflation. That's what I'm tracking right now because that's what seems to be on your guys' mind watching the channel. So really, that's where I'm paying most of my attention. Yet, obviously, I've got money invested. There isn't anything happening in the investment markets right now that is causing me any kind of concern. And like I said on Thursday, even if the markets were to crash, I'm still going to be putting money in because I don't need the money for a long time. And if you're investing, you have to stay true to your principles and to your goals, and that can be very very difficult to do when you're sifting through so much just noise on the internet. Katie's is asking, hey Pete, hope you're well. Who is the best cash ISA provider? A friend of mine has come into some inheritance and doesn't know if they should put money into an ISA or high interest savings. ISA for sure, because ISAs will mean that they're able to keep the money that they've inherited, which hopefully they haven't paid inheritance tax on, tax free. So an ISA for sure. Yes, you may not get the same attractive interest rate on ISAs as you would do just a normal account, but in the normal account you've got to pay 20%. So that 20% that you don't pay in taxes for the higher interest rate, I would argue that you're better off putting that into an ISA. I don't know whether we can actually do a very rough calculation in the background here. I haven't got this set up to share screen, but can we do this? Can we do this live? Can we do this live? Let's have a look. The other thing as well is obviously we don't know how much they've inherited or anything like that. Obviously, the ISAs are great for sure. Do they have the appetite to perhaps put money into stocks and shares ISA? The answer to that is, well, the question that is going to be pertinent to that is, what do they need the money for? I mean, a lot of the time when people inherit money, there is always there is this underlying desire to want to do something good with it, not to squander it for most people, because they recognize that it's come from someone who they loved, who meant something to them, and they've left them a gift. And so, if the money's not going to be needed for 5 years, 10 years plus, and they're looking to use it for things much much later on, then there is an argument potentially to put it into a stock and shares ISA. But then they have to understand obviously risk and all that kind of stuff. Your run in the mill savings account on the high street will definitely be less to think about for sure. Right, I'm just trying to browse as we're doing this to see if I can find an interest calculator to kind of demonstrate what I was talking about in terms of, you might get a little bit more interest, but you're saving 20% on tax in an ISA. So bear me 1 second. Let's see if I can find something. Everything that I'm finding right now really, really, really isn't interesting. Let me see if this one actually would this be functional? Okay, let's just say, just going to use this as an example. I'm going to put that as 0. And let's just do, okay, I can't put that as 0. I need to have it as a 1. So I'm just going to put on here 1, let's say 1 year, for example. And let's just say, what are ISA rates right now? I'm going to make up an arbitrary number here just in terms of comparisons, but I'm not going to make the difference too large, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to assume, let's just say they're able to get something like, I don't know, I'm looking at a 1 year fixed here. So let's be modest and say they're able to get like a 1 year fixed at say 5%, for example, right? And they're a basic rate taxpayer. I'll share this with you in a moment on the screen. But I just want to do this first and foremost just to kind of get an idea of what this would be. Okay, cool. Right, so what do I need to do? Share screen, and I want to share. Which one do I want to share? I want to share this one. Right, let me make sure I get all my dimensions on this right. 1 second, guys. 1 second. Let's add this in. And let's go this way. All right, let me just get rid of your comic very quickly, Casey. Can I walk you through this? All right, so what I've done here is this is just the calculating. This is on a money savings expert. So I've just assumed, look, they've got 10 grand, right? I can't put that at zero. So unfortunately, because that's the ideal thing, I'm going to assume that they don't put anything else in after the £10,000. They just want to put that in. But I can't leave it at zero. So I put it in as a pound. And I've just gone in here to say that they wanted to put it in for 1 year. So a fixed rate ISA, for example, for 1 year with a rate of 5%, and they're a basic rate taxpayer. Now, what that basically means is that they'll have gained about £523.96 in that 1 year. Now, obviously, bit of that is going to be the £1 addition. So let's just say, look, it's 500 quid, right? But then they'll have to pay tax on that 500 quid. Well, they're going to have their personal savings allowance. So they could be okay. I mean, the personal savings allowance, if their basic rate taxpayer, is still £1,000. So anything under £1,000, they won't have to pay tax on. So this is where this amount here becomes really, really important. If they breach over 1,000, they got to pay tax. Now, let's just say they had an ISA, for example, and let's just say it was 4.5%. Then obviously they're going to get less. It's going to be about 450 quid, but then they wouldn't have to pay tax on it. So it really depends on how much they've inherited. It's also going to depend on the personal, what tax bracket they're in, because if they're a higher rate taxpayer, then the personal savings allowance goes down from 1,000 to 500. And if they're additional rate taxpayer, then they get zero. So I would still say that ISAs are a good way to go, purely because in an ISA, it doesn't matter how long it sits in there for, as long as it's in there and it's gaining some kind of interest and growing, there is no tax burden ever. Whereas it's something they would have to think about if it goes into a normal high yielding savings account. So hopefully that helps. Carly, how are you? Really, really good to see you here, mate. Hope you're well. I hope you've managed to get your bits and pieces around the property also sorted. Penguin is also saying here, is it worth putting 4K into a lifetime ISA if I don't have plans to buy a house in the next 5 years? Currently have £60,000 in stocks and shares ISA and plan to max it each year. I mean, if you're a first-time buyer, it doesn't really matter if you're going to be buying beyond 5 years. It's definitely worthwhile putting in money to the lifetime ISA. The fact is, you're going to get £1,000 from the government to help towards a deposit for the house. And even though you do have 60K in a stocks and shares ISA, the additional bit that you're going to get from the government is just going to help bolster a little bit more. So it's definitely worthwhile doing it. And, there is no, obviously you got to bear in mind age here. So I don't know how old you are, you can't open one if you're over 40 or so. So it's worthwhile doing, even though you might be looking at buying in 6 or 7 years time. That's £7,000 potentially free from the government that you'll get over a 7-year period. I'm just saying, I wanted to also mention that it was a great podcast you did on the G7 countries recently about it being a big game changer in the investment world. So informative. Thanks for reading. Cheers, Naeem. You know what? The people have assumed that I'm encouraging people to go and invest in those companies right now, in those countries right now. And it's so frustrating when you put the time into making and researching a podcast like that for people to misunderstand what you're saying. And I know that this is part and parcel of the game. But nowhere in that episode did I say, go and invest in these countries. The idea of the podcast was simply to question what the future of investing is going to be with the rise of the BRICS nations and the fact that their global contribution to GDP has for the first time overtaken the G7. The G7 being, France, the US, Germany, and other big developed economies, right? This collection of ragtag of countries that people have always kind of cast aside, and certainly the Western world and the G7 have kind of looked at like, you're the kid on the block, the new kid on the block that's never going to get anywhere. Guess what? They're getting somewhere. And the point of it is to just question, at what point are we going to see the likes of Goldman Sachs, BlackRock, the big investment houses start to tactically and strategically tweak the way they build their investments so that no longer will there be a huge exposure to the US economy, but there's more exposure to what they call emerging markets, where a lot of these countries basically sit. That was the whole point, and people still misunderstood. But I appreciate you actually got the point. But it's very, very frustrating. There tends to be an argument that ensues. And the thing that I found most interesting in the response for that episode is this is a very, very difficult pill to swallow, because we're in the West right now. And for the longest time, the West has been I guess the aspirational society, or we think it is anyway, right? People want to come to the West, people want to live in the West, people want to work in the West. And it feels as though that tide is changing ever so slightly. And it's going to be very, very interesting to see what the future actually holds in 10, 15 years' time, where the West basically sits in the world order. Because if BRICS continue to go the way they're going, mate, there is going to be a sea change. And people will say, well, they're going to go where the money goes. The BlackRock and the big investment players in this world will never really allocate real resources to these countries. I think you'll be sorely mistaken, mate. These guys they go where the money goes. And if the money's to be made elsewhere, they're going to go where the money goes. And it's really, really interesting to see what's going to happen. But that was the whole point, just to question what the future of investing is going to be, because there is no way the status quo remains the same when we're seeing, those BRICS nations contribute more to the global economy than the G7 combined. I mean, if you look at the growth trajectory of India, just India alone over the past 10 years, if you look at the graph, it's like a parabolic rise. It's huge. And it's very, very interesting. It's going to be a very, very interesting space. But thanks for that, Naeem. Oh, just done that one. 1 second. Let me just have a look. Yeah, I like this for 0. 1 question equals 1 like. So actually, I don't have my normal windows up here at the moment. There it is. So we've got, about 37, 38 people on here at the moment. That we've got about 15 likes. If you can like the video, it would be really, really helpful. Just helps the channel grow. Also gets the video out to other people who may need to see it after the live is actually over. Right, let's have a look and see. 34 years old this year. So you'll be fine, mate. You'll be absolutely fine to open a lifetime ISA and put money into there. Look, it's free money at the end of the day, so don't rob yourself of that free money. The only thing to be mindful of is if you change your mind and you don't use the lifetime ISA funds for a house deposit, you're going to pay a penalty. And the way the penalty works is actually quite interesting. Again, this is where I'm not prepared. Bear me 1 second. Let me see if I can illustrate this to you. Do I need to illustrate? I can explain it, but I think sometimes it actually works really nicely if I'm able to illustrate what I mean in visual form. So let me see if I can get this up and running, and I'll just walk you through what the implication potentially is if you do not use the money in the lifetime ISA and you've got the bonus towards a house deposit. If you don't then use it for a house purchase. So let me have a look at this. What do I need to do? I need to go here, and that should click onto this very, very shortly. Normally it works really quickly, but go slow zone over the past couple of days. I'm convinced I need a new laptop, and the Mac that I'm on is relatively, I've only had it for about maybe 3 years, but yeah, I need to get a new laptop. Right, so let's see if I can actually add this one to my screen, and then I will walk you through the example that is really important. So just ignore this first image that you're going to see. This was something that I did for a session that I ran a little bit earlier on. Let's get rid of this right here. So this is what I'm talking about, right? So let me just go here and get onto this one. So in your lifetime ISA, you can pay £4,000 of your £20,000 into it every single tax year, right? And then for that, you're also going to get a 25% bonus from the government, which equals £1,000, right? Now, let's just say you do this over 7 years, right? So what's that? £28,000 you're going to be depositing, or you're also going to get £7,000 free from the government. So ultimately, you're going to have 35K in there. Now, let's just assume, actually, it doesn't really matter whether it's a savings ISA or a stocks and shares ISA, but let's just assume that during that period of time, this is automatically now gone from 35,000 and you now have £35,500 in there. If you don't use this 35,500 pounds towards a house deposit, what tends to then happen is you then have to pay a penalty. And the penalty means that you've got to pay a 25% or give 25% back to the government from this amount here, which is obviously a lot more than what they would have given you in £7,000. So in quick maths, £35,500 times 25%, you're going to be giving back £8,875, which means the penalty to you for receiving that bonus, not using it for the purpose it was intended for, is £1,875. It's something that is worthwhile thinking about. But that's where we are. So I always try and, say to people, if you can, be as certain as you possibly can with the use of the lifetime ISA for deposit. I mean, you could also use it for income purposes, but if you withdrew the money and it wasn't for income purposes, i.e., pension provisions, right, later on in life, the same thing applies. You'll pay the penalty. And the crazy thing is, imagine you put money into a lifetime ISA and you've done that maybe for 10 years or so, and you've got the bonus from the government for 10 years, right? And then all of a sudden you don't use it for income purposes. The government's making a pretty penny out of you at that point. So again, it's just certainty, which is why I always say to people, when you're looking at retirement planning, yes, lifetime ISAs are great for that, but you may want to have a look at what that translates to in terms of the comparison between an ISA, a lifetime ISA, and a pension. Because one could argue that you're paying more if you don't use it for income purposes in the lifetime ISA than if you would, if you plan this very, very, very well, properly, with some help, doing it via pension. But yeah, that's what I think is worthwhile thinking about. Sebastian, not a lot of good cashback credit cards available in the UK. I don't really do cashback credit cards. I don't cover it on this channel. A channel that's really, really good for that is Andy Webb. Be clever with your cash. That's his thing. He's very, very good at finding deals like cashback credit cards, the best accounts, all that kind of stuff. He's amazing at that kind of stuff. I'm more kind of like interest rates, economy, mortgages, investment, and just basic personal financial habits, knowledge, principles, that kind of stuff, which is, I wrote a book on, financial principles, just to be able to move you through the phases of financial freedom, which ironically is what the podcast is about. Tomorrow, we're talking about the different stages of financial freedom, because people just assume that, in order for you to be financially free, you've got to be Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, and that's not true. And I talk about where I am in the stages as well. So that'll be coming out tomorrow morning for you. Cheers for this. Not finance related. I love the blue furniture behind you. Looks great. Thank you very much. I think one of those colors, or a couple of those colors, is in my brand, unintentionally so. Is part of my brand color. The yellow is a bit of an outlier, but this bookshelf is it hides a lot of sins. Let's put it that way. All of those little drawers that you're seeing right here, they are just jam packed with just like equipment boxes and all sorts of stuff. But it's mad. And even this room, like, I moved up here. It feels like I've been up here maybe 2 months, maybe 3 months now. But things like, when we moved in here, like the wallpaper here, this was a black and white themed room. And it was a spare room, essentially. So it was never intended to be like my office / YouTube studio type thing. So I'm kind of like, oh, do I change this wall color a little bit? I don't know. I'm just not in that mind space right now. It is a working space, so it doesn't match. The furniture doesn't match, but that's because there's been a change in the way the house is kind of configured right now. My office downstairs, which was much smaller, you couldn't really like move at all, and I wanted to be able to have almost 2 angles. So this way, when I'm doing my work meetings, I can also go this way for my work meetings. But generally speaking, the YouTube setup is normally what you tend to see on the Finance Clinic, which is straight to the bookshelf behind me. But today, because I've just been busy and this is an impromptu one, I thought I'd see if this one works, and I think it does. But I just feel like that wallpaper right there clashes with everything else that's here, and I'm mindful I want to fix that. But thanks for the compliment on the furniture, by the way. It was a nightmare to get up to our 3rd floor from downstairs. Oh my god, I had to have three of my mates helped me with it. It wasn't, and yeah, we did it with it all in one piece as well. We didn't take any of it apart. So yeah, thank you for that. Katie, what is the cap amount of tax-free money you can earn in a cash ISA? Say someone puts 20K and they want to keep it up for 18 months. There is no cap. Hang on one second. What is the cap amount of tax-free money you can earn in a cash ISA? There is no cap. If you put 20K in this tax year, and let's just say, out of, an act of God, it goes up to 60K. It's all tax-free, which is why I always say to people, start with an ISA first. It doesn't matter how much it grows to, it's completely tax-free. You'd never have to worry about paying tax on it. And the beauty is as well, from a retirement planning point of view, if you structure things correctly, you can take income from an ISA and the income is also tax-free as well. So there is no cap. Start with ISAs, tax efficiency first. Guy, what's going on? How you doing? Hey Pete, what's the best way to invest 50K long, say 10 to 15 years? My plan for building a property in London are withering away. I'll buy a property in London are withering away. Good one, mate. I mean, I can't give you specifics, because that would be wrong of me to be able to do that. And there'll be nuances in your circumstances. I mean, let's just say, property market crashes in the next 2-3 months. You might then decide, and it happens in London, you may think, well, hang on a second, I'm going to get on my bike here and I'm just going to absolutely plow some money into property. So I can't tell you the specifics of what to do. I do think, though, I'll say what I normally say. If you're looking at a 10 to 15 year time horizon, think tax efficiency first. So what can you put into ISAs, right? So out of that 50K, you can, if you're single, put 20K this year. If you're married, you can double that. £40,000 between you and your partner, you and your wife, if you're married. That immediately gets 40K away from the tax man completely. And you can then put that into, some globally diverse fund of some kind. Again, the strategy that you would pick would be completely dependent on your risk appetite. So if you're the kind that really wants to take high risk, then you may decide that you want to go into something that's relatively innovative, maybe something in tech that could be a little bit high risk. You may even have a look at, things like the AIM market, for example, but I don't know because I don't know what your risk profile is. So, it's very, very hard to say what you should do or the best way to invest for you. But if you just wanted to keep it very, very simple, I would say look at, a globally diversified ETF or index fund of some kind, preferably wrapping it into an ISA so you can keep the tax-free status. And in the example that I just gave of, if you do have a partner, you can get 40K in. What you would do with the remaining £10,000 is, maybe put it into a general investment account because it will act as a feeder account into your ISA for the following tax year. That's generally how we would structure things if I was your financial advisor and we were structuring things. If you're not married, then £30,000 would go into a general investment account. Yes, it will be tax bearing, so you need to be aware of that. But what that will do is when April the 6th, 2024 kicks in, you simply take 20K from your general investment account, pay it straight into the ISA. So you'll have 1 year potentially where you'll pay tax on that money in a general investment account. But over the course of 2 tax years, so 2024, 2025, all of that £50,000 will be within an ISA. You could potentially, if you didn't need the money at all, I mean, I know you said long-term 10, 15 years here, but I don't know how old you are, but let's just say you didn't need the money at all and you're looking maybe further along to retirement, or if retirement is within that 10 to 15 year window, you could potentially also look at pensions as well, because for every pound that you pay, you're going to get 25p from the government. So all of a sudden a £40,000 contribution becomes a lot more because of that contribution, that tax relief that you're going to get in on the way that you pay the money in the first place. There are tons of things you can do, Guy. It really depends on your circumstances and where you are and what the plan essentially is, your risk profile. But hopefully that gives you some kind of initial indication. Let's have a look at this. 1 second, guys. All right, Jake. Hi, Pete. I'm and ahhing about transferring from my Lloyd's Help to Buy to a lifetime ISA. I don't dip into it anyway, but would it be more sensible to make that transfer? I don't dip into it anyway. Help to Buy ISA to lifetime ISA. I think you need to double check because what are the are there any penalties on Help to Buy ISAs? I've not had a question on one of these for ages, so I can't really remember off the top of my head. But you need to be mindful if there are any penalties or so. Because if there are penalties, you may just want to keep it in the Help to Buy ISA and leave it alone until you basically absolutely have to access it. But you still would have got a bonus on that Help to Buy ISA anyway. But I'm just having a look here. I've not had a Help to Buy ISA question for a very, very long time. Really, really good question here, mate. And I cannot remember. Because all of the stuff that I'm seeing on here as well, I'd have to dig deeper into it. I can't give you a definitive answer right now, but I would say you need to be mindful of maybe penalties. If there are any penalties for you withdrawing the cash and transferring the cash from a Help to Buy ISA, because you're doing a transfer, you should be okay. But if you're already speaking to, so if you're speaking to Lloyd's and it's going from a Lloyd's Help to Buy to a Lloyd's lifetime ISA, for example, ask them what the process is and if there are any penalties. If they tell you there aren't, then maybe you do want to do it. It's for the same cause. It's to help you get on the property ladder, I presume. So, but if there are penalties, then you might want to hold fire, mate. Ali. Right, Ali. Hi, Pete. Is it worth cashing in £36,000 stocks and shares ISA to increase the deposit to buy a property for lower mortgage repayments? The goal of investing again to boost retirement income. This is a really, really good question. This is a really good question. I would answer this with a couple of things, really. You've got money in a stocks and shares ISA for retirement provisions, yeah? The first question I have for you is, do you have a pension? Because I think that's going to be a really important consideration. Because when we look at this, if you were my client sat in front of me right now as a financial advisor or even as a coach, because I coach now, I would want to know a little bit more about what you've got. So do you have pensions in place already? I'd want to know what rates you're looking at in terms of mortgages. I'd want to also see your income and expenditure to see where the fine line between being stretched and being too stretched and being comfortable basically sits. Because without knowing that detail, it's hard for me to say 36K is a lot. And when you think about 36K in a stocks and shares ISA, you then have to think about, okay, right, what has your performance been? How long is it going to be invested for? If it is for retirement, purposes, and you've got 20, 25 odd years, you then get into this conversation of, okay, so how much could it potentially return for you in growth over the 36 year over your term, right? So the 36 grand could grow from literally 36K to 100K over a set period of time. You have to offset that against the amount that you would save in mortgage repayments and in interest. And that is a mathematical calculation. Without knowing the numbers that you're looking at, it's very, very hard to say. But it's a really, 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 really tough one. I would say that if you are in a position where you absolutely want to get on the property ladder, because bearing in mind, yes, you're going to pay, mortgage payments. Yes, you're going to pay interest on that mortgage, but it is also true that the property is going to appreciate in value as well. And that's also something that goes into the equation of, okay, so what you might potentially forego being invested in the markets. And yes, there are no guarantees. How does that translate in terms of the savings on interest and the appreciation in property value, potentially, depending on where you're buying? So it's a really, really loaded question. I think whenever we get into these kind of scenarios, I often say to people, look, how important is the objective that's in front of you to you? So if it's paramount, you absolutely want to get on the property ladder, then really the investment returns and the potential investment returns that you're going to get are inconsequential, right? Because the prize is getting on the property ladder, potentially feeling a little bit more secure because you're not at the mercy of rent and landlords. You're also going to get the benefit of the peace of mind that actually, yes, you're paying down this mortgage, but it's also appreciating in value. And you can pull out that equity at any other point in the future. So you'd have to weigh those options up. And ultimately, the question you need to ask yourself is, you know, is it going to help you sleep better at night if you just bite the bullet, buy the home that you've always wanted, and you have that satisfaction that you own the roof that's over your head? I mean, there'll be people who are at the mercy of landlords right now, and it will be horrible. I mean, trade 36 grand for that. I mean, there is no trade. If you don't have to be at the mercy of a landlord that's trying to increase your rents consistently, or you're constantly in fear of, you know, I'm never going to be able to make it onto the property ladder because of the rate at which property prices increase, and this is an opportunity, then by all means take it. But there's a few things to consider in there. Lois is asking here, what is the best uranium stock? I know why you're asking this question, by the way. I cannot give you a name because I haven't looked at uranium stocks. I have looked at one company, but I've not had the time to do any research into that company at all. There was a Canadian company that was literally just found uranium, and it's very, very, very high grade uranium. So with everything that's happening in Niger at the moment, there is that the stock price well, in the last 12 months it's spiked. It spiked on discovery of the uranium, and then the fact that it was really, really high grade. I can't remember the name of the company. I've got it written down in my book somewhere, but I've not had the time to do the research. I can't give you a stock because if I do, that would be irresponsible in terms of I haven't even done the research for myself. If I go and tell you, go and, you know, look at this company or list off a load of companies, that would be unfair. But, you know, you would be right potentially to be looking at uranium stocks, given everything that's happening in Niger at the moment. I mean, God knows what's going to happen. I'm following that very, very closely, but it looks like they're going to go to war for this stuff, France. And it is the Western world again playing master. It pisses me off. It really, really does. But this is the existence that we live in. Like, Africa is not France's. Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso are not the property of France. The country doesn't belong to France. It belongs to the people of that country. And for years, having pillaged them of their resources, they finally get to the point where they've had enough and said, actually, no, we want a more equitable relationship. We're going to stop exporting uranium. We're going to stop exporting gold to you. Then the next move is for military action via ECOWAS. It's just these legacy systems that have been put in place that are now being brought to bear to essentially penalize a country that doesn't belong to you. It's infuriating to think about, and yeah, it's just yeah. There is no penalty transfer from helped by ISA to lifetime ISA, but cannot claim the bonus within 1 year of transferring. There we go. So as long as you're happy with that, then I think that will be a go-to right there. Cheers for that, Mose. Claudio, hi Pete. What are your thoughts about doing yearly partial transfers from a workplace pension into a SIP? Doing it this way would allow us to keep the benefit of match contributions and invest in stocks. I mean, you can do it as long as it's permitted, and it sounds like it is permitted. Obviously, going into a SIP, you're going to have different charge structures than your workplace pension. So just be mindful of that. Just as long as you're happy with the way it's invested in the SIP and you know what you're doing, and you're not losing any benefits, then it sounds, I don't see any reason why it would be a bad idea necessarily, but just make sure you dot all the I's and cross all the T's in making sure. But there's nothing wrong with doing that at all, as long as you're able to keep all of your benefits and you don't lose anything. You're happy with the fact that, you know, SIPs will typically be more expensive than your workplace pension. I mean, workplace pension sometimes, depending on the administrator, they can be good and they can be bad. I mean, if you've got an administrator that doesn't have that many investment choices, then it's very, 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 very difficult to, like, you know, get good performance out of it. Whereas sometimes, and this may be something else as well, and it sounds like you're already down the road with this, but if you are with your administrator with someone like LNG, for example, they've got tons of investment options. So maybe just double check that as well. Make sure that, you know, there aren't options that you can access in the workplace pension that can keep your cost ratio still down below, lower than the SIP, but still offer you potentially the chance to make better returns. So that's worthwhile checking. let me just jump to this. Laura, thank you very, very much. Actually, you know what? I do have something for this, and I tried to get it on my pad. I tried to get on my pad, but I can't get it on my pad. And this will be the first time that I get to. So thank you so much. Tell me if you heard that, by the way. Did you hear that? Because that's something I have actually got. You guys, just for you guys. Did you hear the gong? Thank you so much for that. Really, it does help massively. And some people will say it's only £5, not a lot of money, but hey, it's the thought and the gesture that counts. So thank you very much, Laura. Right, let's see where we were. I'm just looking at the clock. I've got 4 minutes or so. 4 minutes or so. Just saying it. Thanks for the honesty with that. I'll do some digging and see if there are penalties that may be incurred. As Mo's already said, there are no penalties. So just speak with the providers. If you're doing a transfer, generally speaking, you're okay because you won't be essentially breaching any of the rules that go on there. See, look at this. There we go. You found it already. You don't really need me, did you? Just from the little bit that I said, you kind of ascertained who they basically are. But yeah, I mean, that's the company in Canada that found uranium, and people are very, very excited about it, really. So yeah, do your research though. Do your research. Obviously, when you invest in those kind of companies, if you expect they're an individual stock, so the risk is a lot higher. So you need to really do your research on that, and put what you are comfortable with losing into a stock like that, and make sure that it's part of a much wider portfolio in terms of your investment range. I mean, I've got money in individual stocks, but it's a small proportion in compared to the wider amount that I actually have. But so please be careful. But you would be right to be looking at opportunities, current geopolitical plays right now. Abdul is asking, have you had any experience dealing with Royal Mint regarding buying gold and silver? Thanks. No, I don't, because I don't physically buy. I don't buy physical gold and silver, and I believe that's what the Royal Mint do. If I do have any gold or anything like the precious metals in my portfolio, it will be part of the actual investment structure. I don't hold physical or gold or silver, so I don't have any experience with them specifically. All right, this is good going. There's a question here from Katie. Now, actually, I am streaming to Twitter as well. So let me just go over to Twitter and make sure I'm not missing anything over there. Guys, if you are on Twitter, I apologize. I am used to pretty much streaming to YouTube exclusively. And so sometimes I get carried away because I'm just like, hey, I'm here on YouTube. This is my wheelhouse. So let me just have a look and see if there is anything that I'm missing in terms of questions over in the Twitter sphere. Are people still calling it Twitter? Or is it called X now? Like, the logo's changed. Is it still called Twitter? I don't understand. Like, it's so bizarre. The X is black, but everything else, like the icons, are still the old Twitter blue. So what are we supposed to do with this? I really don't understand. But what are you guys calling it? You still calling it Twitter? Are you calling it X? I have no idea what the whole thinking behind this was. You would think that if you're going to change something major with a brand, such as its logo, you would do that in one fell swoop, as opposed to having it as a phased rollout. It's very, very confusing. Right, where am I? Where am I on Twitter? What's going on? Profile. There we go. All right. Okay. There are no questions over on Twitter, which means I don't need to worry about that. Right. Katie is asking here, what are your thoughts on Vanguard or a building society to open a cash ISA? Wanting to use the money earned to go into property, we're thinking to put 4K into a LISA, 16K into a cash ISA. I think you would only put it into a Vanguard cash ISA if you have the intention of investing in it. So if you're not, you're better off going with like a building society or just one of the high street banks, because they'll offer you better interest. I don't think Vanguard offer you any interest on a cash ISA. So what would happen is you would have the money just sat in a cash pot, but it's not really going to be doing much, mate. So if the intention is you just want it easily accessible, go to a high street bank or building society, I think. AJ's saying here you could use money markets. You could use money markets. Money markets can go up and down though. So again, if you might get a better deal if you're just looking at a building society, high street bank. But do a comparison and see what you're thinking. They offer effective 2%. Yeah, look, you're better off on a high street bank. I mean, I don't know what the cash ISA rates are. Best cash ISAs are at the moment. Let's have a look. Actually, best cash ISA rates today. Let's have a look. Okay, this is pretty good actually. Actually, this is very good. Let me just share this with you. Let's get rid of that and let's go to. We want this one right here. All right. So these are cash ISAs right now at the moment. So Aldermore has a 1 year fixed rate ISA at 5.71% at the moment. They got a 2 year at 5. You see, why would you do a 2 year at 5.61? I mean, some people might if they just want to know that they've got a return for 2 years. I mean, as you go longer with them, the rate's getting lower. So there's one here at UBL, 5.77% fixed for 1 year, 5.75. So it looks like you can get fixed rate ISAs now well within the 5 range for sure. And if you're paying 2% minus fees, you're better off going for something like that. I mean, this is a fixed rate, obviously. If you wanted it instant access, I don't know what instant access ones they have right now. Let's see if I can find one on here. Instant. Do they have one? I can't imagine like instant access, easy access ISAs will be too far behind that 5% mark. I mean, you're lucky you'll be able to get an instant access ISA at 5% as well. But yeah, I would definitely have a look at high street, I would imagine, for a better rate is what I would argue. Right, Sophie just asking here, what would you advise someone that is 31 and will be mortgage free in 6 months? What to do next? Wow, dude. Like, Sophie, amazing. Like, seriously, at 31. See, the podcast episode tomorrow talks about financial freedom and the spectrum of financial freedom. This is a big, big, big step towards financial freedom, especially if you're paying off the mortgage, you're going to be mortgage free with no other debts at all. So no credit card, no overdraft, no personal loan, no car finance. If you haven't done when you become mortgage free in 6 months' time, I would strongly encourage you, go hammer and tong. Go hammer and tong at trying to make sure that you clear any mortgages, any personal loans, overdrafts, credit cards, car finance that you have. So I'm doing this in reverse. So I've got no other debts at the moment apart from my mortgage, which the goal is in 2 years' time, that's going to be scraped and done. And what it basically does, it gives you the ability to really hone in to what really matters for you. And it's great because you're there at 31. It's amazing because if listen to the podcast tomorrow, it's really important you do actually. It's going to give you a lot of insight here. But being mortgage free is going to mean that the mortgage probably is your biggest monthly commitment and has been your biggest monthly commitment, right? So without that allotment of cash to go towards a mortgage, now you can start to look at, again, number one, reducing any other debt that you have. Prioritize that first. Then once that's all done, you can then have a look at how do you now start to make the best use of that capital to build for the future. Now, for you, that could be by way of investment, stocks and shares. It could be by way of property. It could be anything. But the point is, if you get to the stage where you're mortgage-free, completely debt-free, you're going to have all of your income, whatever that might be, to build for the future. Obviously, you're going to cover your essential expenditure, but your essentials are going to be minuscule. So be able to maximize the cash that you are earning to build for the future. And at the same time, being able to have the freedom to say, actually, you know what, there are a few things that I want to do, holidays I want to take, places I want to go, experiences I want to have, that you can also fund from that money. This is a beautiful place to be, mate. It's amazing. And listen, this right here, this is the dream. And when we talk about financial freedom, this is what most people aspire to, not Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk levels of wealth. It's this, and you're there at 31. This should be applauded 100%. And I don't have an applause. I need to get an applause button, especially for you. If you come to the next one, I'm going to give you an applause when I see your comment. But yeah, you're in a really, really good place. If you need help, go and seek help as well, because how you allocate your cash is going to be very, very important. You need to make sure that you don't overextend yourself. So make sure that you're doing things that aren't too uncomfortable, that are within the confines of what you can comfortably, sustainably maintain. And that's the key point. Sustainably maintain, not something that you think, sounds like a good idea to start off with, but then it just kind of falls away. You also need to cue into, the bigger picture. What do you want? Like, you're 31, you're going to be mortgage free. What do you actually want out of life now? How do you build those building blocks from now into making that a reality? I do a lot of coaching with people like yourself, actually, where we go through exercises, we go through some behavioral pattern assessments, we go through exercises around setting goals and what that might look like. We do a timeline exercise where we look forward, plan back, and that then puts into place what you need to do specifically and how to keep it up. But this is amazing, mate. This is really, 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 really good. And yeah, congratulations. And you're saying no other debt. This is amazing. This is amazing. Honestly, you should be so fucking pleased. It's amazing. The potential for you is absolutely huge. It's just about making sure that you pick the right thing for you and making sure that you don't listen to the noise on social media on what you should be doing because other people are doing this. You do what you think is right for you. But the potential is huge. It really, really is. So well done. Really, really well done. And that is a fantastic note to end this on this evening. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm away next week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday. It's my partner's birthday, so we're going away. We're going to be in Portugal for 4 days at a resort. And yeah, it means activity next week is going to be a little light. I've got so much going on in the background. I've just not had the time to do recorded videos. And I haven't done that for a while on the channel because I enjoy doing these lives and getting interaction from you guys. I don't know that I have the time to really prepare any recorded stuff for next week. So next week may be really, really light. But I appreciate you. I will see you when I see you. If I'm able to do some lives whilst I'm out there, I will. But I probably won't because it is 4 days where I intend to get my head down and do nothing. And that's very, very rare that I do. So thank you so much, guys. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday evening. And more than anything, enjoy next week. I hope to see you and have you listen to the podcast tomorrow on financial freedom. But as always, remember, money's a tool, life's a living. Catch you later on.
Yeah. Surprise, a little different than you're used to. Yeah. Dropping these bars on YouTube, knowledge I introduce you. Yeah. We chasing this money like it's the prize, it's the voodoo. Fugazi, fugazi, it's just a lie we buying into. We need some cars on deck. Get the rollies, get the Moe, all the Mars on deck. We got the traders, got the picture with the Bentley in Dubai. Are you dripping in designer looking fly? On the Bombardier, sipping on the wine. Broke man, we broke. Where's the fun in being broke? Stocks and bonds get you yo. That's what I'm teaching these folks. I see that smoke, see them choke. Getting coked. While I'm researching these stocks, buying coke. 20 months on the channel, million people taking note. I got a warrant for Buffet. I'm coming for his vote.